Hello, hello, hello. Happy Passover, everybody. Happy Passover. Happy Passover. Happy Easter. Tomorrow, Good Friday. This Sunday, Easter Sunday. If you're celebrating, wish you all good things. Uh, Gang, today's poll question at Smerconish.com, the Thursday poll question at Smerconish.com. Does President Trump, benefit politically from all of the following? 1, fighting Harvard. 2, not facilitating the return of Abrego Garcia. And 3, reducing the IRS workforce. More about that in a moment. First, thanks to my friends at Parx Casino. 1 year after finishing with the worst record in the NBA in pro basketball, Detroit headed to the playoffs for the first time since 2018. Detroit basketball is in the pro basketball playoffs against New York starting this weekend. The Play Gun Lake online sportsbook and casino app, they've got you covered. Much more fun when you've got skin in the game to be watching all the action. Join me right now. Download the app. Get in on all the action. Detroit baseball is back as well. But whether you're on the side of the winning team or not, there's always action, a lot of prop bets, a lot of fun stuff that you can participate in. The only app that I ever use and recommend to bet sports and play all my favorite casino games in the state of Michigan, Play Gun Lake. Check out live dealers and so much more. Play blackjack, roulette, poker, craps, the hot online slots, Cash Eruption, 88 Fortunes, Cleopatra. And then I love those that are based on some of the streaming favorites like Squid Game, Breaking Bad, and Peaky Blinders. New users get up to $1,000 casino bonus back if you're down in the first 24 hours. Go to playgunlake.com. Download the app right now. That's got to be wagered, that casino bonus. You've got to be 21. And in Michigan, for the Play Gun Lake online casino and sportsbook app, gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So results from yesterday's poll question at Smerconish.com, 39,176, just a tick under 40,000 votes cast. Thank you for that. Should federal funding be cut from universities like Harvard in response to perceived failures in addressing campus anti-Semitism? I had a good conversation in the third hour of yesterday's program with Yair Rosenberg, who wrote a piece for The Atlantic, Gesundheit, highlighting the concern of many that the stated purpose of fighting anti-Semitism is a cover story, Or as my friend Larry Seisler has said to me, and he's Jewish and makes this point, that he thinks that Jews are being used as human shields for a larger objective of the Trump administration. But it's part of a larger narrative, as I see it, of the administration seeking to cripple all forms of opposition, academia, big law, and the media. Yesterday, I shared a perspective that I have. I actually tweeted it pre-show, and it gives rise to today's poll question. What I tweeted yesterday was this. There are 3 stories dominating the news today. In each, Donald Trump is wrong on the merits, according to me, wrong on the merits, but benefiting politically. 1, defunding Harvard. 2, not facilitating the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And 3, reducing the IRS workforce by 40%. Wrong, 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 I said. Cheers, applause, USA, USA. I think politically he is winning on the wrong side of each of these issues. And it's interesting that tweet that I sent out provides a framework for conversation today, given various updates that are important and in the news. I remain convinced that Trump is besting Democrats on each of these. Let me try and make that case. First of all, relative to Harvard, the IRS is now contemplating revoking Harvard's tax-exempt status. That's my number 1 story today at Smerconish.com. In fact, we pulled it from the Harvard Crimson. This version in front of me from the New York Times. The Internal Revenue Service is weighing whether to revoke Harvard's tax exemption, according to 3 people familiar with the matter, which would be a significant escalation of the Trump administration's attempts to choke off federal money and support for the leading research university. And then further along in this story, it says federal law bars the president from either directly or indirectly requesting the IRS to investigate or audit specific targets. The IRS does at times revoke tax exemptions from organizations for conducting too many political or commercial activities. This obviously a matter headed for the courts. The second issue in my tweet, where I said that the president is on the wrong side, but nevertheless benefiting, is the plight of the so-called Maryland man now imprisoned in El Salvador. Well, the IRS Harvard story that I just quoted from the New York Times has a byline shared by Maggie Haberman. You know Maggie Haberman. She's often on CNN. She writes a lot of front page stories about the Trump administration, just as she did in Trump 1.0. Well, she happened to be a guest of Caitlin Collins on CNN last night. And Caitlin Collins asked her a question. What is your sense of what's happening behind the scenes at the White House? This is relative to the so-called Maryland man. And Maggie Haberman's informed opinion based on sources confirms what I speculated here yesterday, which is they're loving it. Quote, they're ready to see what the judges do, and they're going to come to court, Haberman replied, and I think that they're going to take the same minimalist approach that we have seen, but the general feeling in the administration is that they have better odds than not within the Supreme Court. And then she goes on to say, this administration wants this fight. You saw that today. They have seen that every day that they talk about immigration, they think the court of public opinion is generally on their side, and they would certainly rather be talking about this than talking about tariffs or talking about economic confidence decreasing. That is exactly what I said yesterday. It's exactly what I meant in the tweet, and it's exactly what I'm asking in today's poll question. They are winning politically, the Trump administration, even by being, in my opinion, on the losing side of these issues. And meanwhile, talk about optics, you've got Senator Chris Van Hollen unable to see, much less facilitate the return to the United States of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Quote, Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat of Maryland, on Wednesday tried and failed to secure a meeting in El Salvador with Abrego Garcia, the Salvadoran immigrant and Maryland resident who was mistakenly deported by the Trump administration and remains imprisoned in his native country. So Van Hollen is in El Salvador, and meanwhile, and I have in front of me the New York Post today, and the New York Post today has a headline of "Whose side are you on?" Mom of woman killed by illegal shames her senator for migrant grandstanding. So this is all a story about Patty Morin, whose daughter Rachel was killed by an illegal, also from El Salvador, convicted Monday of that crime and leaving 5 children motherless. She said that Senator Van Hollen, although he's in El Salvador trying to bring back the quote unquote Maryland man, didn't acknowledge or barely acknowledged her daughter's murder in his state. Again, I ask, who is winning politically on these issues? Should the Maryland man have had due process? Yes. Is the sympathy of the country going to be on the side of the Maryland man who didn't get due process, or on the side of Rachel Morin's mom? Obviously, the latter. And by the way, another issue in today's news cycle that relates to all of this. Speaking of Patty Morin at the White House, if I were programming television, I would have cut in on that. If I were on air on radio and were aware, I watch television monitors while I'm on the air so that we can see and cover breaking news. But if I were on radio, I would have interrupted to say, hey, TC, let's take it live and see what's going on with the mom. MSNBC and CNN did not cover it. I think that's a mistake, but it's their mistake to make because we have a First Amendment. And in this country, the government is not supposed to tell the media what they should and should not cover. But that is now taking place. And I think this is really problematic. From Mediaite today, Federal Communications Commission Chair Brendan Carr threatened news outlets owned by Comcast and suggested that the company's licensed operations could be in jeopardy because of its immigration coverage. On Wednesday, White House Communications Director Stephen Chung slammed MSNBC, a subsidiary of NBC Universal, which is owned by Comcast, and CNN over their coverage of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And the aforementioned tweet from Chung was, quote, shameful, all caps, that CNN and MSNBC refuses to take angel mom Patty Morin as she recounts the terrible tragedy of how an illegal killed her sweet daughter, Rachel. Chung tweeted hours later. Carr, quote, tweeted the post and stated, Comcast outlets spent days misleading the American public, implying that Abrego Garcia was merely a law-abiding U.S. citizen, just a regular Maryland man. When the truth comes out, they ignore it. What's the point? The point is that I have disagreements with the administration on the basics of these fundamental issues. But the idea that they would now try and dictate the way that the media would cover them, way the hell over the line. Way the hell over the line, in my opinion. I mean, Trump really is seeking to act as big brother in each of these instances, and this is the consistent theme in silencing big law, academia, and the media. And I've gone through all the examples in the past of how they're doing that. Which brings me finally to story number 3 in terms of those that I referenced in my tweet. Remember, it was the IRS story. And we spoke of this extensively here this week about how we have a $37 trillion debt. The administration is seeking to reduce the IRS workforce by 40%. I think when you hear that IRS agents are being scaled back, your visceral reaction again is, well, that's great. Until you think it through logically and you say, well, how many people today, especially wealthier Americans, as we just saw tax day 2 days ago, are going to say, I'm going to hedge this year. I'm going to be in the gray zone this year because after all, they don't have the personnel to conduct the audits that historically they have. So that's why I referenced in my tweet the 40% reduction at the IRS. Now, here's the IRS update. It's not exactly on that issue, but it's interesting nonetheless. The story is that the IRS supervisor, made famous by speaking out about alleged political influence in the Hunter Biden investigation, has now been sworn in as the acting commissioner. His name is Gary Shapley. Gary Shapley has been my guest. I have introduced Gary Shapley as well as the other IRS agent who were on the vanguard of, blowing the whistle, Joseph Ziegler, that's his name, relative to Hunter Biden. I found them both to be credible. I found them both to be, straight arrows as best I could determine. Whether Gary Shapley has the credentials to now run the IRS, I don't know. Gary Shapley took an unusual path. This is the CBS coverage to the top IRS job. He was a supervisory special agent leading dozens of staff in his 14th year at the agency. When he came forward in a 2023 interview with CBS News chief investigative correspondent Jim Axelrod, Shapley revealed internal misgivings about what he described as improper pressure to go easy on the president's son. He was the first of 2 IRS whistleblowers to make this case before Congress. Biden, of course, ultimately pled guilty to tax crimes and was pardoned by his father. But you'll remember the story because they allege that DOJ slow-walked the investigation and instructed them not to pursue leads related to Joe Biden. They were removed from the case and temporarily sidelined with pay. One of those 2 whistleblowers now sworn in and running the IRS. So those are your updates, and that's why I'm kind of going back to the well today in the Thursday poll question, and I'm asking, does President Trump benefit politically from each of the following 3 issues where I think he's on the wrong side, but getting a bump? Fighting Harvard, not facilitating the return of Abrego Garcia, and reducing the IRS workforce. The answer to the poll question is yes. It'll remain yes until it won't. And when might that happen? I have an idea. The bottom potentially falls out when there is, and some say we're there already, when there is a clear standoff between the judicial and executive branch, and the Trump administration fails to adhere to, honor a court order. And I say that armed with new data from Reuters, what Americans think about Trump's conflict with the courts. When this question is asked by Reuters, the president should obey federal court rulings even if he disagrees with them. Among all adults, there's 82% approval. Among Republicans, the number drops to 68%. That's a bit alarming. Among Democrats, it's 97%. Among others, it's 82%. So I'll say it this way. Overwhelmingly, Americans have said they believe the president has an obligation to follow federal court orders. Each of these that I'm asking about, the fight with Harvard, the return of Abrego Garcia, the reduction of the IRS workforce, are all going to result in litigation, or already are resulting in litigation of one form or another. If, in fact, the White House, the administration, President Trump, loses any of these battles in federal court and defies the court orders, then I think that the political upside that he's right now getting from them is going to totally switch. But not until that time. Not until that time. And as it stands right now, he's got the winning hand, politically speaking. Politically speaking. Go vote on today's Thursday poll question at Smerconish.com. Does President Trump benefit politically from all of the following? You can't go through and answer yes for one, no for two, maybe for three. It's all or nothing the way that I worded it. Is he benefiting politically from each of those three examples that I gave you? Fighting Harvard, not facilitating the return of Abrego Garcia, and reducing the IRS workforce? The answer is yes, yes, and yes. Yes. Until it won't be, for the reasons I've described. Okay, thank you. Like and subscribe. Set yourself up for notifications. Happy Passover. Happy Easter. See ya.